Brought to you by WikiVidi.com. The Notorious B.I.G. Christopher George Latore Wallace, better known by his stage names The Notorious B.I.G. Biggie, or Biggie Smalls, was an American rapper. He is ranked by Billboard magazine as among the 10 greatest rappers of all time. Wallace was raised in the Brooklyn borough of New York City. When he released his debut album Ready to Die in 1994, he became a central figure in the East Coast hip-hop scene, and increased New York City's visibility in the genre at a time when West Coast hip-hop was dominant in the mainstream. The following year, Wallace led his childhood friends to chart success through his protégé group, Junior M.A.F.I.A. While recording his second album, Wallace was heavily involved in the growing East Coast-West Coast hip-hop feud. On March 9, 1997, Wallace was killed by an unknown assailant in a drive-by shooting in Los Angeles. His double-disc album Life After Death, released 16 days later, rose to number 1 on the U.S. album charts and was certified diamond in 2000 by the Recording Industry Association of America, one of the few hip-hop albums to receive this certification. Wallace was noted for his loose, easy-flow, dark, semi-autobiographical lyrics and storytelling abilities, sometimes changing his pitch on songs. 3 more albums have been released since his death. He has certified sales of 17 million units in the United States. 1972–94, early life arrests, career beginnings and first child. Wallace was born in St. Mary's Hospital in Brooklyn, New York on May 21, 1972. As the only child of Latore Wallace, a Jamaican preschool teacher, and Selwyn George Latore, a Jamaican welder and politician. His father left the family when Wallace was 2 years old, and his mother worked 2 jobs while raising him. Wallace grew up in the Clinton Hill section of Brooklyn on 226th Street, James Place, near the border of Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn. At Queen of All Saints Middle School, Wallace excelled in class, winning several awards as an English student. He was nicknamed Big because of his overweight size by age 10. He said he started dealing drugs when he was around the age of 12. His mother, often away at work, did not know of her son's drug dealing until Wallace was an adult. At his request, Wallace transferred out of Bishop Loughlin Memorial High School to attend George Westinghouse Career and Technical Education High School, which future rappers DMX, Jay-Z and Busta Rhymes also attended at the time. According to his mother, Wallace was still a good student, but he developed a smart-ass attitude at the new school. At age 17, Wallace dropped out of school and became further involved in crime. In 1989, he was arrested on weapons charges in Brooklyn and sentenced to 5 years probation. In 1990, he was arrested on a violation of his probation. A year later, Wallace was arrested in North Carolina for dealing crack cocaine. He spent 9 months in jail before making bail. Wallace began rapping when he was a teenager. He entertained people on the streets and performed with local groups the Old Gold Brothers and the Techniques. After being released from jail, Wallace made a demo tape under the name Biggie Smalls, a reference to a character in the 1975 film Let's Do It Again, as well as his stature. He stood at 6 feet and weighed 302 according to differing accounts. The tape was reportedly made with no serious intent of getting a recording deal. However, it was promoted by New York-based DJ Mr. C, who had previously worked with Big Daddy Kane, and it was heard by the editor of The Source. In March 1992, Wallace was featured in The Source Unsigned Hype column dedicated to aspiring rappers, and made a recording off the back of this success. The demo tape was heard by Uptown Records, a and record producer Sean Combs, who arranged for a meeting with Wallace. He was signed to Uptown immediately and made an appearance on label mates Heavy D. Soon after signing his recording contract, Combs was fired from Uptown and started a new label. Wallace followed and in mid-1992 signed to Combs' new imprint label Bad Boy Records. On August 8, 1993, Wallace's longtime girlfriend gave birth to his first child, Tiana. Wallace had split with the girlfriend for some time before Tiana's birth. Wallace wanted his daughter to complete her education despite being a high school dropout himself. Wallace said that if his mother had promised him what he promised his daughter, everything she wanted, Wallace would have been not only a graduate but also at the top of his class. He continued selling drugs after the birth to support his daughter financially. Once Combs discovered this, he forced Wallace to quit. Later in the year, Wallace gained exposure on a remix to Mary J. Blige's single Real Love. Under the pseudonym The Notorious B.I.G. He recorded under this name for the remainder of his career after finding the original moniker Biggie Smalls was already in use. Real Love peaked at number 7 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart, and was followed by a remix of Blige's What's the 411. He continued this success, to a lesser extent, on remixes with Nena Cherry and reggae artist Supercat in 1993. In April 1993, his solo track Party and Bullshit appeared on the Who's the Man soundtrack. In July 1994, he appeared alongside LL Cool J and Busta Rhymes on a remix to label mate Craig Mack's Flavor in Ya Ear, reaching number 9 on the Billboard Hot 100. 1994, Ready to Die and Marriage. On August 4, 1994, Wallace married R. 5 days later, Wallace had his first pop chart success as a solo artist with double A-side Juicy, Unbelievable, which reached number 27 as the lead single to his debut album. Ready to Die was released on September 13, 1994 and reached number 13 on the Billboard 200 chart, eventually being certified 4 times platinum. The album released at a time when West Coast hip-hop was prominent on U.S. charts, according to Rolling Stone, almost single-handedly shifted the focus back to East Coast rap. It immediately gained strong reviews and has received much praise in retrospect. In addition to Juicy, the record produced 2 hit singles, the platinum-selling Big Poppa, which reached number 1 on the US rap chart, and One More Chance, which sold 1.1 million copies in 1995. Busta Rhymes claimed to have seen Wallace giving out free copies of Ready to Die from his home, which Rhymes reasoned as his way of marketing himself. Around the time of the album's release, Wallace became friends with Tupac Shakur, also a rapper. Cousin Lil Cease recalled the pair being close, often traveling together whenever they were not active in furthering their careers. According to him, Wallace was a frequent guest at Shakur's home and they constantly spent time together. When Shakur was in California or Washington, D.C., it was claimed by M.A.F.I.A, an Oakland MC, that Wallace's style was inspired by that of Shakur. Wallace also formed a friendship with Shaquille O'Neal, remembering his first time hearing Wallace during listening to the song Gimme the Loot, where Wallace mentioned him in the lyrics and thereby attracted O'Neal to his music. O'Neal requested a collaboration with Wallace, which resulted in the song You Can't Stop the Rain. Sean Combs related that Wallace would not do collaborations with anybody he didn't really respect, adding that Wallace paid O'Neal respect by shouting him out. Daz Dillinger said in 2015 that Wallace and he were cool. Wallace would travel to meet with him, and Dillinger recalled serving him cannabis and recording 2 songs with him. 1995 Junior M.A.F.I.A conspiracy and coastal feud. In August 1995, Wallace's protégé group Junior M.A.F.I.A released their debut album Conspiracy. The group consisted of his friends from childhood and included rappers such as Lil' Kim and Lil Cease, who went on to have solo careers. The record went gold and its singles, Players Anthem and Get Money, both featuring Wallace, went gold and platinum. Wallace continued to work with A, with both reaching the top 20 of the Hot 100. By the end of the year, Wallace was the top-selling male solo artist and rapper on the US pop and R. In July 1995, he appeared on the cover of The Source with the caption, "The King of New York takes over," a reference to his Frank White alias from the 1990 film King of New York. At the Source Awards in August 1995, he was named Best New Artist, Lyricist of the Year, Live Performer of the Year, and his debut album of the year. At the Billboard Awards, he was Rap Artist of the Year. In his year of success, Wallace became involved in a rivalry between the East and West Coast hip-hop scenes with Shakur, now his former friend. In an interview with Vibe in April 1995 while serving time in Clinton Correctional Facility, Shakur accused Uptown Records founder Andre Harrell, Sean Combs, and Wallace of having prior knowledge of a robbery that resulted in him being shot 5 times and losing thousands of dollars worth of jewelry on the night of November 30, 1994. Though Wallace and his entourage were in the same Manhattan-based recording studio at the time of the shooting, they denied the accusation. Wallace said, "It just happened to be a coincidence that Shakur, was in the studio. He couldn't really say who really had something to do with it at the time. So he just kinda leaned the blame on me." In 2012, a man named Dexter Isaac, serving a life sentence for unrelated crimes, claimed that he attacked Shakur that night, and that the robbery was orchestrated by James Rosamond aka Jimmy Henchman. Following his release from prison, Shakur signed to Death Row Records on October 15, 1995. Bad Boy Records and Death Row, now business rivals, became involved in an intense quarrel. 1996, more arrests, Tupac Shakur's death and second child. Wallace began recording his second studio album in September 1995. The album, recorded in New York City, Trinidad and Los Angeles, was interrupted during its 18 months of creation by injury, legal wranglings, and the highly publicized hip-hop dispute in which he was involved. During this time, he also worked with R. Lil Cease claimed in 2013 that Wallace denied his wishes to meet Jackson, citing that he did not trust Michael with kids. On March 23, 1996, Wallace was arrested outside a Manhattan nightclub for chasing and threatening to kill 2 autograph seekers, smashing the windows of their taxicab, and then pulling one of the fans out and punching them. He pleaded guilty to second-degree harassment and was sentenced to 100 hours of community service. In mid-1996, he was arrested at his home in Teaneck, New Jersey for drug and weapons possession charges. In June 1996, Shakur released hit M.A.F.I.A diss song in which he claimed to have had sex with Wallace's wife and that Wallace copied his style and image. Wallace referred to the first claim about his wife's pregnancy on JZ's Brooklyn's Finest, where he raps, "If they have twins, should probably have 2 packs. Get it? 2 packs." However, Wallace did not directly respond to the record during his lifetime, stating in a 1997 radio interview that it was not his style to respond. Shakur was shot multiple times in a drive-by shooting in Las Vegas, Nevada on September 7, 1996. and died 6 days later on September 13, 1996, of complications from the gunshot wounds. Rumors of Wallace's involvement with Shakur's murder were reported almost immediately. A two-part series Chuck Phillips wrote for the Los Angeles Times in 2002, Who Killed Tupac Shakur? Based on police reports and multiple sources reported that the shooting was carried out by a Compton gang called the South Side Crips to avenge the beating of one of its members by Shakur a few hours earlier, and that Wallace paid for the gun. His family publicly denied the report, producing documents purporting to show that the rapper was in New York and New Jersey at the time. The New York Times called the documents inconclusive, stating the pages purport to be 3 computer printouts from Daddy's house, indicating that Wallace was in the studio recording a song called Nasty Boy on the night Shakur was shot. They indicate that Wallace wrote half the session, was in and out, sat around, and laid down a ref shorthand for a reference vocal, the equivalent of a first take. But nothing indicates when the documents were created. And Louis Alfred, the recording engineer listed on the sheets, said in an interview that he remembered recording the song with Wallace in a late-night session, not during the day. He could not recall the date of the session, but said it was likely not the night Shakur was shot. "We would have heard about it, Mr. Alfred said." Moreover, Phillips' article was based on multiple sources. As the assistant managing editor of the LA Times, Mark Duvoisin wrote, Phillips' story has withstood all challenges to its accuracy, and remains the definitive account of the Shakur slaying. Faith Evans remembered her husband calling her the night of Shakur's death and crying due to him being in shock. Evans added, "I think it's fair to say he was probably afraid, given everything that was going on at that time, and all the hype that was put on this so-called beef that he didn't really have in his heart against anyone." Wayne Barrow, Wallace's co-manager at the time, said Wallace was recording the song Nasty Girl the night Shakur was shot. Shortly after Shakur's death, he met with Snoop Dogg, who claimed that Wallace played the song Somebody Gotta Die for him, in which Snoop Dogg was mentioned, and declared he never hated Shakur. On October 29, 1996, Faith Evans gave birth to Wallace's son Christopher C.J. Wallace Jr. The following month, junior M.A.F.I.A. member Lil' Kim released her debut album Hardcore under Wallace's direction while the two were having a love affair. Lil' Kim recalled being Wallace's biggest fan and her being his pride and joy. In a 2012 interview, Lil' Kim said Wallace prevented her from doing a remix of the Jodeci single Love You for Life by locking her in a room, and according to her, Wallace stated that she was not gonna go do no song with them, likely because of the group's close affiliation with Tupac and Death Row Records. 1997, Life After Death and Car Accident. During the recording sessions for his second album, tentatively named Life After Death, Till Death Do Us Part, later shortened to Life After Death, Wallace was involved in a car accident that shattered his left leg and temporarily confined him to a wheelchair. The injury forced him to use a cane. He and Lil' Cease were arrested for smoking marijuana in public and had their car repossessed. Wallace chose a Chevrolet Lumina rental SUV as a substitute despite Lil' Cease's objections. The vehicle had brake problems before the accident, but Wallace dismissed them. According to Lil' Cease, Wallace's leg was shattered when they hit a rail along with Lil' Cease's jaw. Wallace spent months in a hospital following the accident and had to complete therapy. Despite his hospitalization, he continued to work on the album. The accident was referred to in the lyrics of Long Kiss Goodnight. "Ya still tickle me, I used to be as strong as Ripple B, till Lil' Cease crippled me." In January 1997, Wallace was ordered to pay $41,000 in damages following an incident involving a friend of a concert promoter who claimed Wallace and his entourage beat him up following a dispute in May 1995. He faced criminal assault charges for the incident, which remains unresolved, but all robbery charges were dropped. Following the events of the previous year, Wallace spoke of a desire to focus on his peace of mind. "My mom, my son, my daughter, my family, my friends are what matters to me now." Death and funeral. Maine, murder of the Notorious B.I.G. Wallace traveled to California in February 1997 to promote his upcoming album and record a music video for its lead single Hypnotize. On March 5, 1997, he gave a radio interview with the Doghouse on KYLD in San Francisco. In the interview he stated that he had hired security since he feared for his safety. This was because he was a celebrity figure in general, not because he was a rapper. Life After Death was scheduled for release on March 25, 1997. On January 8, 1997, Biggie Smalls and Sean "Puffy" Combs made a video for the song What's Beef, directed by Dave Meyers. On March 8, 1997, he presented an award to Toni Braxton at the 11th Annual Soul Train Music Awards in Los Angeles and was booed by some of the audience. After the ceremony, Wallace attended an after-party hosted by Vibe magazine and Quest Records at the Peterson Automotive Museum in Los Angeles. Other guests included Faith Evans, Aaliyah, Sean Combs and members of the Bloods and Crips gangs. On March 9, 1997 at 12:30 a.m., Wallace left with his entourage in two GMC Yukons to return to his hotel after the fire department closed the party early due to overcrowding. Wallace traveled in the front passenger seat alongside his associates Damian D. Rock Butler Jr., M.A.F.I.A. member Lil Cease and driver Gregory G. Money Young. Combs traveled in the other vehicle with 3 bodyguards. The 2 trucks were trailed by a Chevrolet Blazer carrying Bad Boy's director of security. By 12:45 a.m., the streets were crowded with people leaving the event. Wallace's truck stopped at a red light 50 yards from the museum. A black Chevy Impala pulled up alongside Wallace's truck. The driver of the Impala, an African-American male dressed in a blue suit and bow tie, rolled down his window, drew a 9mm blue steel pistol and fired at the GMC Suburban. 4 bullets hit Wallace in the chest. Wallace's entourage rushed him to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, but he was pronounced dead at 1:15 a.m. Biggie's funeral was held on March 18, 1997 at the Frankie Campbell Funeral Chapel in Manhattan. There were among 350 mourners at the funeral, including Queen Latifah, Flavor Flav, Mary J. Blige, Lil Kim, Lil Cease, Run DMC, DJ Kool Herc, Busta Rhymes, Salt M Pepper, DJ Spinderella, Foxy Brown, Sister Souljah and others. After the funeral, his body was cremated and the ashes were given to his family. Posthumous releases. 16 days after his death, Wallace's double-disc second album was released as planned, with a shortened title of Life After Death, and hit #1 on the Billboard 200 charts, after making a premature appearance at number 176 due to street date violations. The record album featured a much wider range of guests and producers than its predecessor. It gained strong reviews and in 2000 was certified diamond, the highest RIAA certification awarded to a solo hip-hop album. Its lead single, Hypnotize, was the last music video recording in which Wallace would participate. His biggest chart success was with its follow-up Mo Money Mo Problems featuring Sean Combs and Maze. Both singles reached #1 in the Hot 100, making Wallace the first artist to achieve this feat posthumously. The third single, Sky's the Limit, featuring the band 112, was noted for its use of children in the music video directed by Spike Jonze, who were used to portray Wallace and his contemporaries, including Sean Combs, Lil' Kim, and Busta Rhymes. Wallace was named Artist of the Year and Hypnotize Single of the Year by Spin magazine in December 1997. In mid-1997, Combs released his debut album No Way Out, which featured Wallace on 5 songs, notably on the third single, Victory. The most prominent single from the record album was I'll Be Missing You, featuring Combs, Faith Evans, and 112, which was dedicated to Wallace's memory. At the 1998 Grammy Awards, Life After Death and its first 2 singles received nominations in the rap category. The album award was won by Combs' No Way Out, and I'll Be Missing You won the award in the category of Best Rap Performance by a Duo, a group in which Mo Money Mo Problems was nominated. Wallace had founded a hip-hop supergroup called The Commission, which consisted of Jay-Z, Lil Cease, Combs, Charlie Baltimore, and himself. The Commission was mentioned by Wallace in the lyrics of What's Beef on Life After Death and Victory from No Way Out, but never completed an album. A song on Duets, the final chapter titled What You Want, featuring Jay-Z, was based on the group. In December 1999, Bad Boy released Born Again. The album consisted of previously unreleased material mixed with guest appearances including many artists Wallace had never collaborated with in his lifetime. It gained some positive reviews but received criticism for its unlikely pairings, the source describing it as compiling some of the most awkward collaborations of his career. Nevertheless, the album sold 2 million copies. Wallace appeared on Michael Jackson's 2001 album, Invincible. Over the course of time, his vocals were heard on hit songs such as Foolish by Ashanti and Realist Niggas in 2002, and the song Runnin' with Shakur the following year. In 2005, Duets, the final chapter, continued the pattern started on Born Again, criticized for the lack of significant vocals by Wallace on some of its songs. Its lead single, Nasty Girl, became Wallace's first UK #1 single. Combs and Latore Wallace have stated the album will be the last release primarily featuring new material. A duet album titled The King and I, featuring Evans and Notorious B.I.G, was released on May 19, 2017, following the 2 singles NYC featuring Jadakiss and When We Party featuring Snoop Dogg. Musical style. Listen. File name 112 feet. The Notorious B.I.G Only You remix. .org. Title Only You. Description: Wallace, accompanied by ad-libs from Sean Puff Daddy Combs, uses onomatopoeic vocables and multisyllabic rhymes on his 1995 collaboration with R. Format .org. File name 2niggersbleed.org. Title 2 Niggers Bleed. Description: 2 Wallace tells vivid stories about his everyday life as a criminal in Brooklyn. Format 2.org. Wallace mostly rapped on his songs in a deep tone described by Rolling Stone as a thick, jaunty grumble, which went deeper on Life After Death. He was often accompanied on songs with ad-libs from Sean Puffy Combs. On the Source's unsigned hype, his style was described as cool, nasal, and filtered to bless his own material. AllMusic described Wallace as having a talent for piling multiple rhymes on top of one another in quick succession. Time magazine wrote Wallace rapped with an ability to make multisyllabic rhymes sound smooth, while Crims describes Wallace's rhythmic style as effusive. Before starting a verse, Wallace sometimes used onomatopoeic vocables to warm up. Latif of Latix notes that Wallace had intense and complex flows. Fredro Starr of Onyx says Biggie was a master of the flow, and Bishop Lamont states that Wallace mastered all the hemispheres of the music. Notorious B.I.G. also often used the single-line rhyme scheme to add variety and interest to his flow. Big Daddy Kane suggests that Wallace didn't need a large vocabulary to impress listeners. He just put his words together a slick way and it worked real good for him. Wallace was known to compose lyrics in his head rather than write them down on paper in a similar way to Jay-Z. Wallace would occasionally vary from his usual style. On Playa Hater from his second album, he sang in a slow falsetto. On his collaboration with Bone Thugs and Harmony Notorious Thugs, he modified his style to match the rapid rhyme flow of the group. Themes and lyrical content. Wallace's lyrical topics and themes included mafioso tales, his drug-dealing past, materialistic bragging as well as humor and romance. Rolling Stone named Wallace in 2004 as one of the few young male songwriters in any pop style writing credible love songs. Gorilla Black in the book How to Rap describes how Wallace was able to both glorify the upper echelon and make you feel his struggle. According to Latore of the New York Times in 1994, Wallace's lyrics mixed autobiographical details about crime and violence with emotional honesty. Marriott of the New York Times believed his lyrics were not strictly autobiographical, and wrote he had a knack for exaggeration that increased sales. Wallace described his debut as a big pie with each slice indicating a different point in my life involving bitches and niggers. From the beginning to the end. Ready to Die is described by Rolling Stone as a contrast of bleak street visions and being full of high-spirited fun, bringing the pleasure principle back to hip-hop. AllMusic write of a sense of doom in some of his songs, and the NY Times notes them being laced with paranoia. Wallace described himself as feeling broke and depressed when he made his debut. The final song on the album, Suicidal Thoughts, featured Wallace contemplating suicide and concluded with him committing the act. On Life After Death, Wallace's lyrics went deeper. Crims explains how upbeat, dance-oriented tracks alternate with reality rap songs on the record and suggests that he was going pimp through some of the lyrical topics of the former. XXL magazine wrote that Wallace revamped his image through the portrayal of himself between the albums, going from mid-level hustler on his debut to drug lord. AllMusic wrote that the success of Ready to Die is mostly due to Wallace's skill as a storyteller. In 1994, Rolling Stone described Wallace's ability in this technique as painting a sonic picture so vibrant that you're transported right to the scene. On Life After Death, Wallace notably demonstrated this skill on I Got a Story to Tell, creating a story as a rap for the first half of the song and then retelling the same story for his boys in conversation form. Legacy. Considered one of the best artists in hip-hop music, Wallace was described by AllMusic as the savior of East Coast hip-hop. The Source magazine named Wallace the greatest rapper of all time in its 150th issue in 2002. In 2003, when XXL magazine asked several hip-hop artists to list their 5 favorite MCs, Wallace's name appeared on more rappers' lists than anyone else. In 2006, MTV ranked him at number 3 on the list of the greatest MCs of all time, calling him possibly the most skillful ever on the mic. Editors of About.com ranked him number 3 on the list of the top 50 MCs of our time. In 2012, The Source ranked him number 3 on the list of the top 50 lyrical leaders of all time. Rolling Stone has referred to him as the greatest rapper that ever lived. In 2015, Billboard named Wallace as the greatest rapper of all time. Since his death, Wallace's lyrics have been sampled and quoted by a variety of hip-hop and pop artists including Jay-Z, 50 Cent, Alicia Keys, Fat Joe, Nelly, Ja Rule, Eminem, Lil Wayne, Game, Clinton, Sparks, Michael Jackson, and Usher. On August 28, 2005, at the 2005 MTV Video Music Awards, Sean Combs and Snoop Dogg paid tribute to Wallace. An orchestra played while the vocals from Juicy and Warning played on the arena speakers. In September 2005, VH1 held its second annual Hip Hop Honors with a tribute to Wallace headlining the show. Wallace had begun to promote a clothing line called Brooklyn Mint, which was to produce plus-sized clothing, but fell dormant after he died. In 2004, his managers Mark Pitts and Wayne Barrow launched the clothing line with help from Jay-Z, selling T-shirts with images of Wallace on them. A portion of the proceeds go to the Christopher Wallace Foundation and to Jay-Z's Sean Carter Scholarship Foundation. In 2005, Voletta Wallace hired branding and licensing agency Wicked Cow Entertainment to guide the estate's licensing efforts. Wallace-branded products on the market include action figures, blankets, and cell phone content. The Christopher Wallace Memorial Foundation holds an annual black tie dinner to raise funds for children's school equipment and supplies, and to honor the memory of the late rapper. For this particular event, because it is a children's schools charity, B.I.G is also said to stand for books instead of guns. There is an oversized portrait mural of Wallace as Mao Zedong on Fulton Street in Brooklyn, a half-mile west from the Star's old block. A fan petitioned to have the corner of Fulton Street and St. James Place near Wallace's childhood home renamed in his honor, garnering support from local businesses and attracting more than 560 signatures. The Notorious B.I.G's children C.J. and Tiana are set to star in an animated series called House of Wallace. Biopic. Notorious is a 2009 biographical film about Wallace and his life that starred rapper Jamal Woolard as Wallace. The film was directed by George Tillman Jr. and distributed by Fox Searchlight Pictures. Producers included Sean Diddy Combs, Wallace's former managers Wayne Barrow and Mark Pitts, as well as Voletta Wallace. On January 16, 2009, the movie's debut at the Grand 18 Theater in Greensboro, North Carolina was postponed after a man was shot in the parking lot before the show. The film received mixed reviews from critics and grossed over $44 million worldwide. In early October 2007, open casting calls for the role of Wallace began. Actors, rappers, and unknowns all tried out. Beanie Sigel auditioned for the role but was not picked. Sean Kingston claimed that he would play the role of Wallace, but producers denied it. Eventually it was announced that rapper Jamal Woolard was chosen to play Wallace, while Wallace's son Christopher Wallace Jr. was cast to play Wallace as a child. Other cast members include Angela Bassett as Voletta Wallace, Derek Luke as Sean Combs, Antonique Smith as Faith Evans, Notori Nocturne, formerly of 3LW, as Lil' Kim, and Anthony Mackie as Tupac Shakur. Bad Boy released a soundtrack album to the film on January 13, 2009. The album contains hit singles of B.I.G. such as Hypnotize, Juicy and Warning, as well as rarities. Brought to you by WikiVidi.com. Would you like to know more?